Shreveport Police Chief Ben Raymond. Chief Ben, welcome back to Keel. Thank you for taking time for us.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Chief Raymond, lots of discussion now about reforming how we police our communities. In fact, one council member has said reform or defund right here in our city.
What do you think about that? How do you define reform? I know how you define defund.
I don't know that I could even fathom what the defunding of the police department would look like. We'll just talk about reforms. I think that's probably more. That's what we need to focus on. And there's several things already in the works. In fact, I've been emailing throughout the last hour. We've just made some immediate changes to our use of force policy. Some language to clarify the prohibition of strangleholds, chokeholds, anything that restricts the airflow to an individual's brain or that would restrict the carotid artery, which is one of several suggestions that have been made. So we've made it clear that that's prohibited unless you're in a lethal force situation. We added some additional language requiring medical treatment. We had language requiring medical treatment, but we just kind of clarified it and put some additional words in there to help clarify in what situations medical treatment shall be provided and what that means, what type of medical treatment. We clarified some language on duty to intervene, and if there's excessive force encounters another officer may be engaged in, and the duty to report any excessive force encounters. Internally, we're making some changes to supervisory overview of any instances of force and recommendations to the command staff on a daily basis as to what events may have occurred in the last 24 hours that need to be brought to our attention, and suggestions made from the command staff as to whether there may have been violations, whether investigations need to be opened up. So we're making several immediate changes to policies right now. And then there's some long-term things we're looking at. We'd like to revamp our Citizens Police Academy, but utilize it as a method to explain use of force. Take citizens through our use of force class that we teach cadets. Do some scenario-based training and explain some of the decisions that have to be made by officers, split-second decisions. We'll talk about things that are maybe foreign to a lot of people, action versus reaction, and some things that you would have to attend the class to fully understand. I think we need to have more continuous town hall meetings where we discuss national-level policing events. So, it's difficult to discuss what's going on, as you know, due to due process rights, civil service laws, officer bill of rights. But we can certainly discuss something that happened in Minneapolis and talk about what would that look like here? How would the police department respond locally?
When you talked
how
about
can we assure you it won't happen?
When you talked about the duty to intervene, a lot of officers will say, this cat's my superior. I don't feel comfortable. He's saying, here's how we're going to handle it. You're going to put in place measures where it doesn't matter who that cop is. If something's going wrong, you need to step up.
Well, yeah. So those measures have been in place. And look, from a supervisory perspective, a supervisor has authority if he's making legal, moral, and ethical decisions. But a supervisor does not have any authority than any other person if what they're doing is illegal or immoral and unethical. Now, immoral and ethical, that's more subjective, right? What you consider moral and ethical, what I consider moral and ethical may be different. But legal is a no-brainer. So if there's excessive use of force, that's possibly illegal. And so there's absolutely nothing wrong with the lower-ranking officer saying, hey, that's enough, stop. There's a different way to go about this, whatever the case may be. And then report that to your supervisor superior if that's the case. So certainly that should be done.
When you talk about reevaluating the SPD's use of force policy, do you think there may be some response from officers and possibly a great number of officers who might say, if we do things like eliminate chokeholds or other things, that you are placing a greater risk of injury on those officers?
No, because it's been outlawed. It just hasn't been specified in our policy. So it's been taught at our academy that if you're restricting airflow, it's a lethal force situation. Now, I do want to clarify, if someone's choking me, right, there is a tactic where in order to get out of that choke, I end up choking them. Mm-hmm. But if you're choking me as a police officer, you're using lethal force against me. in which case it would be acceptable for me to use lethal force against you. So we're not saying that you can't ever use a chokehold or stranglehold, but you certainly can't do it unless you're in a lethal force situation. But that's consistent with our training for years.
You know, maybe I was using that as a bad example, but I was using that as an example about taking a look at use of force. Are there other things that down the line in the not too distant future that maybe officers will not be allowed to do that they may feel puts them at a greater risk because they cannot use what they might think is appropriate force?
We're not going to implement any policies. I think that, you know, some of the rhetoric that you hear would possibly have officers feel that way. If they feel like, if we feel like we don't have the support of the people that we serve, then that's going to affect, I fear, the level of enforcement, service, protection that you get from your police officers.
Chief, let me go there because you've watched what's happened over the last couple of weeks. Police officers are the bad guy now. You guys are evil. You don't do your job properly. How do you continue to motivate your officers who are going out there, some of them going out there to protect me and are paid under $40,000 a year? How do you keep those people on this job at this low pay and at a morale that will keep them doing what we need them to do?
Well, that's where all citizens need to be thankful that you got men and women that have felt the true calling to this job. They've got thick skin, and they're going to do the right thing regardless of what people say about them. It's not for everybody. Everybody cannot do this job. In fact, a lot of people can't do this job. We serve a city of 200,000 people. We've got 513 police officers. We get fewer than 150 applications every academy class. So everyone's not set up for it. But be thankful that the 513 we have today are dedicated, and they're not going to allow negativity to keep them from their calling.
Okay. Recruiting is an issue. Are you doing anything with regard to reforming the police department that would help you attract more officers? It seems now you're going to have a way harder time than ever getting police officers, people to step up to say, hey, I want that job. It sounds good.
Well, what I would hope is that some that are so critical, you know what, come out and make those improvements to your department, right? So if you're critical of the way that you believe police enforce laws, put in your application, come join our academy, and make those improvements from the inside. I welcome that.
Okay. Police unions, people have said they don't need to be unionized. Where do you stand with regard to that?
I'm not anti-union at all. You know, there's conflict there sometimes, right? So I think the purpose of a union is just to make sure that an employee's rights are being respected by the employer. And I think as long as you stick to that realm, that make sure that we're treating our employees fairly and appropriately within legal guidelines, and as long as we both are working toward that end, then there's a place for them. What you don't want to see is unions getting to the point where they're so concerned about an employee's rights that you don't recognize that we have our greater services to the citizens. And so there are people that don't need to remain in this profession, and let's don't allow them to maintain employment because of some perceived violation of a minor policy procedure. You know, let's make sure that those that don't need to be in the uniform don't get in the uniform. And if we determine as administration that they don't need to be wearing it, let's be consistent with that.
Councilwoman Tabitha Taylor said this week that she wanted better lines of communication between the police department and the council. Will that be part of your reform efforts? Will you work harder to make sure that happens?
And yes, I feel like I have a good line of communication. I understand the concerns regarding the in-custody deaths, which I know we're not discussing. I respond to council members 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Quite literally, I get emails from them all the time. And I got one last night at about 7:30. I just got into the house, and I immediately responded no, I'll get you that either tonight or tomorrow. I never got a chance to log on my computer at home last night to get to that. Came in this morning about 7:15, immediately sent it. So I'll respond to the council members' requests. I think what's important is that when we have a major incident, I'll report that information to the mayor. That's who I'll work for. I'll do a better job in the future of identifying, hey, Mayor, do you mean to notify the council? Do you want to notify the council? Do you mean to notify Chief Whitehorn? What manner do you want us to make sure that we notify them? 18 months ago or so, when I took the position, we added city council members to our major notification. Our major notification email is what is used to make me aware of what's going on. So I get awakened several times a night by emails. Last night we had a shooting. We had two major accidents, I believe. I try to fall asleep between calls. But that information was also provided to the council members through a major notification. That's something that, to my knowledge, had never been done before. So quite literally, they're getting the updates that I get through the major notification system. And so we're doing our best to keep them in the loop and to be as transparent as possible with the operations of the police department.
Police Chief Ben Raymond, thanks for your time, sir.
A pleasure, sir. Always great
ma'am.
talking to you. Thank you.